Societal and political trends are rapidly breaking down the family that once was the cornerstone of our great American culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every single week. And we always invite all opposing views. Can you imagine that every dollar spent by our government was available in a way for the average person to read and understand? You know, like so we can deal with it? Can you imagine paying less each year for bridge and tunnel tolls? Unheard of, right? That's like taxes going down. Yeah, sure. I hear the echo. Ideas like these and many more will be spoken about with my politically involved guest today, Mike Cino. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Chris.
You are running in Bergen County, right,
yes,
for the 5th District, I got that right?
Correct, U.S. Congress.
U.S. Congress, okay. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I went to Georgetown University. I studied economics there. And after college, I went back to my hometown, and I went back into my family business, and we sold wholesale gasoline to gas stations. And at one point, I had 50 accounts where I sold our low-price gasoline. So in a way, we kept the market down. We kept all the other stations competing with us, and we kept the gasoline prices down. So it was like a tax cut for everyone, because everybody, even who went to the other stations that were competing with us, they had lower gasoline prices and more money in their pocket.
Because they were competing against your lower price structure, right?
Exactly. And we had 50 stations around northern New Jersey in the 80s and the 90s.
Some of your experiences that you have in international business diplomacy, certificates in that, right?
Yes, I have a certificate from Georgetown, which is interesting. It's a great field of study. It's the study of international corporations, multinational corporations, and how they deal with foreign countries when they make an investment and they open a factory down there or sell their goods and services. And that relates to us in a big way right now, because now we have NAFTA, and we have all these international trade treaties, like the Pacific Trade Treaty that they just passed this summer, a few weeks ago.
And that was like NAFTA was a long time ago, right? It's
yes.
The same type of deal?
But for like 20 Pacific countries, and we're a Pacific country as well. So basically now we had the field of study where people imagined multinational corporations as being American companies going into a third world country and how that affected the third world country. But now we have foreign countries coming into the United States, foreign companies coming into the United States. So this makes a whole set of issues here. How does that affect jobs in the United States? How does that affect our economy? All these big companies that are basically foreign-based, now here having a huge influence on our economy.
Talk to me a little bit about the Federal Reserve and its monetary policy.
Well, the big story right now is when will the Federal Reserve act in a way that will raise interest rates. And what they do is that right now basically they call it printing a lot of money. But what they do is they just allow a lot of money to be available to banks, and they're supposed to loan it out. But that's the traditional model. What they're really doing right now is putting the money out on Wall Street, and they're not loaning it to the small companies and the Main Street companies all around the United States.
Isn't that a little bit what happened to the downturn in the market, in the real estate market? There was some money available, and that's the same type of thing?
It's the same type of thing.
You know, because I'm a novice at this.
See, let me just give you some background. Between the end of World War II and the 1990s, we had a very stable economy because we had some very wise policies that were put in place. The Federal Reserve policies. And in the 90s, our government, some big influences, some big Wall Street interests came down to Washington and got them to take away those good policies that we had put in place after the Depression and after World War II. One of them was Glass-Steagall.
And it's a Glass-Steagall bill. Glass-Steagall.
The Glass-Steagall Act was put in place after the Depression, and basically it said insurance, banking, and stock brokerage firms had to all be separate. There were 3 separate areas, and they all had to be separate. And now they've allowed these companies to merge and create mega companies. But the problem is that now the money is mixed up between the banking, the stock market, and insurance. And that creates major problems. And a lot of people are talking about that as one particular way they got rid of the old policies that were good. One of the other ones was Regulation Q, which involved the mortgage derivatives on Wall Street.
That's what happened in the last bunch of
and
years,
how they were
right?
regulated. And the other thing was just a general enforcement. We have good laws on the books, but they're not being enforced. We have a very weak enforcement system right now, and they're basically letting Wall Street do whatever they want, and it's not good for the economy, as we can see. We've been through a 7-year recession here.
Yeah, I mean, the real estate market and the mortgage-backed securities, or is it securities-backed mortgage? I get that backwards.
Mortgage-backed securities.
Mortgage-backed securities cause an awful lot of trouble.
Massive amounts of trouble.
Okay, what about the possibility of the increase in interest rates, and that would discourage borrowing?
Yeah, right now, we're in a very unusual period. The last 7 years, the Federal Reserve is basically pumping money into the economy because the economy has been so weak. We need that influx of money. The problem is that in a normal economy, that would be extremely inflationary. I mean, we're almost at Weimar Republic standards in terms of the monetary policy.
What's that?
Weimar Republic?
Yeah.
Well, in the 1930s, Germany, before Hitler, they had a democracy, and they started printing a whole bunch of money until inflation went through the roof. And there were people that you needed like a wheelbarrow of money to get a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
So inflation is a major danger because everybody has savings, especially our seniors, people in their 50s and 60s have a huge amount of savings. Inflation can come in and say, and will have the effect of cutting the purchasing power of your savings. And you could lose half the value of your savings, half the purchasing power. So inflation is a very serious danger to people, seniors, older people who've been saving all their lives. And it's a real serious problem right now.
You know, how can you put some of what you're saying into language that works for the voter?
Well,
you know,
right now, the biggest problem we have is jobs.
Because it makes sense to me, but I'm not, not your area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Economics is a very complicated situation, and we have a multi-tiered economy. And when they start affect one part of the economy affects the other. So I'm running for Congress right now. We have a program because I don't believe the people in Washington care about American jobs like you and I do. I mean, most of us have a family member who's out of work, or a friend who's out of work, or somebody who's taken a job that is like half a job or less, underemployed.
Cuts and pays, whatever it is.
Yeah, they've taken huge cuts and pays. They've made a larger salary in the past, and now they're forced to take a lower salary. We don't want to see that. We want to have economic opportunities for our careers, but also our family and our friends. We want to see everyone do well. Now, these trade deals have promised the American workers that we're going to get better and better jobs, that overall we're going to lose the low-paying jobs, and we're going to get a whole set of higher-paying jobs. That was the promise. And we haven't gotten that.
Almost the opposite in a way.
And we've gotten the opposite. And we've gotten less jobs for Americans. And we've gotten a lower pay scale. We've gotten a whole bunch of lousy paying jobs. And we have to reverse that. But the problem is we're stuck right now in this 7-year period where we have very few jobs overall. Plus the Federal Reserve has been pumping all this money in for the past 7 years, which is, I mean, the average person does not understand that this is an unprecedented amount of money that's being pumped into the system. And it's going to have massive effects on our economy. And it's going to hurt the individual person because your savings is going to lose its value.
Is the only way out of this to tighten our own belt? And I'm not suggesting we do this, but I mean, how else can we reverse this trend or get the government to tighten its belt?
This happened on a more minor scale under Jimmy Carter. And it's very important to look back at our economy. And you know, we divide up our history as to who was the president at the time. So Johnson passed a lot of social programs. We all know that. We give Lyndon Johnson a lot of credit for the 1960 social programs. But what many people don't realize is that Nixon expanded those programs way beyond what was intended by Lyndon Johnson. Now,
I didn't know that.
it's true. It's very true. If you look at it, some of these programs were doubled in size under Nixon. In addition, Nixon put into place price controls. So he said to companies, you cannot raise your prices above a certain level, certain percentage. And why did they do this at the time? They were spending a lot of money in Vietnam on the war. And they felt that price controls was a way to put a damper on inflation while they're spending so much money in Vietnam. Now, a lot of economic policies that they set in Washington have their either good effects or bad effects maybe 5, 6, 7 years down the road. Because when you put an economic policy into effect in Washington, it takes a lot of time for it to filter through the economy and take effect. So Nixon's policies really hit under Jimmy Carter. And we had massive inflation in this country under Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, that's as I was selling real estate at the time, and the interest rates went up to like 17 or 18%.
Exactly. Jimmy Carter got blamed.
House. I was bounced out of the real estate business because of that term in office.
A lot of people got hurt. Jimmy Carter got blamed for that, but really it was caused by the economic policies under Nixon that resulted in the inflation later. And what happened was they brought in Paul Volcker, who was very smart at the Federal Reserve, and he raised the interest rates. He raised the interest rates, and that put the damper on inflation at the time. And that's what, at the time they called it stagflation. The economy stagnated and we had inflation at the same time, which is basically two horrible things hitting at the same time, stagflation. So Paul Volcker came up with the solution at the time, raising interest rates. But it hurt a lot of businesses, many businesses that depended on lower interest rates or a reasonable interest rate.
Why does it always seem that the guy who runs the small business, which I think is the lifeblood of this world, we get slammed? I mean, I'm a small business operator.
Without a doubt.
It's hard to move to progress. As we get close to progress, we immediately have to lay out more money for salaries.
Exactly.
I mean, we got caught in this trap of not being able to move forward because the constraints are too high.
That's 100% correct.
How do we?
Because your small businessmen at the time were depending on reasonable interest rates. And they set up their businesses thinking that we're going to have a reasonable interest rate going forward. And what happened was Paul Volcker came in, they had to do something about inflation. So they raised the interest rates, and that hurt a lot of small businesses. A lot of people went out of business. A lot of people got very hurt. So Reagan came in, and Reagan's solution was, let's start loaning a lot of money to Main Street, the small businesses. And I think this is an excellent policy for us to model our...
Those were my best years.
Exactly.
The Reagan years.
They were my best years too, believe it or not. Yeah. I was young, I was in college, I was working for my family business in the summers during college. And believe it or not, we got the best banking environment then, in the 80s. Than we've ever had.
And looking at it administration after administration, and the way I see that, there was another advance during the Clinton administration, but a different kind. I call it the bubble.
Yes, I was just going to get to that.
Yeah, okay.
But let me just go back to Reagan for a moment.
Yeah.
Reagan lent a lot of money to small businesses. And then the way they did that was they gave money to the small banks around the country, and they in turn lent to the smaller businesses. Now, at the time, that kind of went bust. With the Resolution Trust Corporation, we had a recession. But the losses from that policy were practically nothing compared to the losses we had in 2008 and in this recession. So looking back now, one can say Reagan's policies worked out great because we made a lot of money with a very small loss. And it basically is a really good formula for us to model right now.
A good plan of action, it seemed. Okay, can something like that work now? I mean,
I believe so. I believe so. And exactly what you just said, let me answer your question. In the 90s, we abandoned these good policies that we had put in place for 50 years. We learned the lesson from the Depression. We learned how our economy reacts to something like World War II, high defense spending. And people in Washington created really good, solid economic policies, and for 50 years. And most of us grew up under those solid, wise economic policies. And we got used to the United States having a stable economy. Well, all of a sudden in the 90s, people in Washington, big interests in Washington, got together and said, let's get rid of those policies. Why did they do that? Because they thought they were going to make more money under a new set of policies. And what happened? Just exactly what you said. Now we have a bubble economy. And we've had basically 3 bubbles and bursts, bubbles and bursts.
Isn't it true to some degree that almost any administration can say that they had one in their 8 year, in the double, anytime it's a double term of 8 years? Reagan had a small recession, I think it was at the front end, from Carter, right?
Yes.
And then Clinton had one at the back end before Bush took over, am I right?
Yeah.
Did I get that right? Doesn't that happen, is there cyclical drops and ebb and flows? The general public has this notion that something's going to drop at some point.
Yeah.
And people are afraid, it throws the fear of investments. If you've had a bunch of years of success, that they fear that fall is coming out in front of them.
Exactly.
I think it influences them, don't you think?
Yes. Well, I think the policies that we have in place in Washington since the 1990s have created this bubble economy. And we have to realize that a lot of people are making money off the bubbles. And they don't care what happens to everyone else
right.
in the bust.
That sounds familiar.
For instance, let's go back and remember the internet bubble. Yeah. A lot of people were making a lot of money off that internet bubble.
That was in the 90s.
In the late 90s.
Right.
But a lot of people ended up putting their savings into these internet stocks. And it looked great for a while.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, boom.
Boom, yeah.
Everybody lost their money.
Some people call that the tech bubble. Is that a tech?
Yeah,
is that
the tech
one?
bubble, yeah.
Okay.
Now the other thing that was bad about the bubble is that general investment of businessmen was drawn away from normal brick and mortar businesses, regular businesses. And everybody was saying, including the banks, we want to put our money in the tech stocks. But those were the bubble companies. They wanted the fast money.
Right.
But all the other investment in the other industries was neglected. And we're kind of paying the price right now because we haven't been putting the investment.
So you think, in other words, maybe that we're probably still in this situation?
Without a doubt, because I'll explain.
Okay.
Because to get out of the recession created by the first bust, which was the internet bust, they created another bubble, which was the mortgage bubble.
Will they ever learn?
Well, I mean, it's crazy. Now, the mortgage bubble was interesting because it stimulated the construction industry. So there was a lot of houses being built. So anybody related to housing was making a lot of money as well. Mm. The mortgage-backed securities became the vogue on Wall Street. But obviously, that was very unwise policies. And we had investment directed toward mortgage-based securities. So, like, there was a town in Norway that was told, take all your money and put it into mortgage-backed securities. And then they went bust. Mm. Iceland, the country of Iceland, was encouraged to get involved with some very unwise...
American investments you're talking about?
Yes, yes, these foreign towns, foreign countries
into our bubble markets.
Caught, yes, in a very bad way.
Didn't that also happen to the Japanese going back about 30 years ago, or was it 20 years ago in New York City development?
Yeah.
Right? they bought a lot of buildings.
Rockefeller Center.
Yes,
they bought Rockefeller Center, and they had to sell it at a loss.
Right.
Yeah. So we had another bust in 2008. And obviously everyone got hurt. A lot of people got thrown out of work. Now, what you have, again, the same pattern. Very small people make a lot of money in the bubble. And they're happy. And they're giving campaign contributions to the politicians. They're like, let's keep this going. This is great. Yeah. In the mortgage-backed securities, the Wall Street guys were saying, let's keep this going. This is great.
We have to tie that knot somehow. We have to tie that knot.
But meanwhile, everybody else is at risk.
Sure.
And when that bust comes, right across the economy, everyone's hurt. And we've been hurting for 7 years.
It seems like there's no way out of that.
Well, there is a way. There is a way out. Now,
your plan is going to...
Well, I have a plan. I mean, obviously we're headed for a bust. Everyone says,
yeah.
When is the Federal Reserve going to raise interest rates? Because they signal that as the beginning of the bust. Because so much money is coming in, it's pushing the stock market up. So a lot of people have an illusion, oh, my portfolio is doing great. So that means we're doing fine right now. But how's Main Street doing? all the small businesses around the country.
Still really, it's
And
frustrating.
what we have is a lot of the Federal Reserve money going toward Wall Street and the stock market. And that is in sharp contrast to a traditional economic model, where when the Federal Reserve puts a lot of money out there, a lot of it filters down to small businesses and small towns around the country. But that hasn't been happening in the past 10 years.
Not
No.
this one, right.
And that's the
But
important
traditionally,
difference.
that's right. Traditionally, that usually does happen when
Exactly.
when markets continue to grow. There's a trickle down.
Exactly.
They
We've-
always use that.
The mergers in the banking industry. And also, the big banks have decided, hey, I'm going to make more money on Wall Street. I'm not going to lend to small businesses. And that's really the structural problem that we have to address.
How can you reverse that?
Well, this is
can you make that
basically
happen?
what we've been doing since the 1990s is we've been running this economy like it's a banana republic. I mean, this is banana republic type stuff. So we actually can look back on some of the banana republics and what their economists have done in the 70s and the 80s. And they came up with some pretty good ideas on how to deal with banana republic type policies. And one way to do it is to kind of create a two-tier system. We have to raise interest rates for the big guys on Wall Street. We have to restrict the money and pull back the stock market.
That's what Trump was saying something about that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
But we don't have to have that policy affect Main Street and the small businesses. We can create a second-tier system where the Federal Reserve is giving money to the smaller banks around the country. A lot of them have merged. So we have to go out and find these smaller banks because they're there.
These small banks often get caught up in these mergers. That's not
Yes.
unusual. That happens in business too sometimes.
But there's still some small banks left. They're still around.
Yeah.
You see the smaller names. We need Washington policies, Federal Reserve policies, that get a lot of money to the small banks, with the condition that they don't go to Wall Street and gamble the money and use it to pump up the stock market. The condition is they lend the money. They have to lend the money to small businesses and keep the money on Wall Street. The small businesses in this country are the ones that create the jobs.
Yeah.
70%
It's always
of
been.
our job
And
creation
those are
is small businesses.
From 1 to like 200 employees in that range, right? It was a 250.
Yeah.
Or considered small business.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Because when you get big, these big companies start shedding employees. They go through and restructure
you're also
everything.
more engineered by government issues, and you have taxation and all kinds of other issues that you have to deal with. That on the smaller level, you're a little bit more freer if you're successful.
Exactly. See,
So you want to make this. You want to make the small business operator and the small to medium-sized individual
We've been ignoring
businessman,
them.
right, grow to develop the kinds of jobs.
Exactly.
And, okay.
Because we've been ignoring them.
We only got about 4 minutes left. I want to make sure
And
you
our
cover.
financial
Did I miss your
system-
steps? So we have.
Sure.
I'm not asking a question. I'm asking you. Did we cover all your steps? I just don't want to
Sure,
miss
this
any.
is it. This is the major,
Oh, okay,
major point.
okay.
For the past 20 years, we've been neglecting the small businesses and starving them with capital. I mean, without capital. And the small businesses can survive with less capital. But if we start giving them business loans and they start having money to invest, they will be creating jobs. And we'll see a lot of jobs being created. I'll bet you many small businessmen already have plans that they know what to do to expand. They just haven't been able to do it.
Sure.
Because for the past 20 years, they have been cut off from the access to the capital to make those investments. What we need to do is do investments like we did in the 80s, where the small banks were lending to the small companies.
Can we operate, though, in these times, or have times changed enough so that the current way that we need to make money and do business and be capitalists in this particular point in time in history where we are, as well as we did, say, in the Reagan years? Is it matchable or comparable?
Well, we have a different structure right now in the financial system. But yes, we can do that. We can put restrictions, and we can basically have a different monetary policy. One for the big banks, one for the big guys, and one for the smaller banks that are lending.
Second tier you're talking about.
Yeah, that's money that's being lent to the small businesses. That has to have a different set of rules. And that is the way to create jobs in this country. We will have an explosion of jobs in this country if we do that.
You're, just want to double check the place. You're running in Bergen County, right?
Bergen County. I have parts of 4 counties in New Jersey. I got Bergen, Passaic, Sussex, and Warren.
Okay.
And
That's
it's
in north and
Republican.
north central, all right? Jersey?
Yeah, basically North Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm running in the Republican primary June 7th.
June 7th coming up in 16?
About 7 months from now, yes.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like
2016.
a lot of luck. Last comment, we have about
Thank
1 minute
you.
left. Anything you want to finish with your plan? You're done with your plan, right?
Well, this is American jobs.
Yeah.
The guys in Congress got together this summer and they passed the Trans-Pacific Trade Deal. They voted to ship 1 million jobs out of the country. These people don't care about American jobs. We need people in there who care about Americans being employed.
Yeah, we have to come back. I want to thank you very
Sure.
much. I wish you a lot of luck. Thank you, Mike Cino.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching FIT TV, the program that brings you behind the scenes of our divorce culture. At FIT, we know you cannot get this information on your own, so we'll bring it to your TV every single week. And of course, we always invite all opposing views. My name is Chris DiMaggio. Thank you for watching FIT TV, and we'll see you again next week.